This video is brought to you by Incogni. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. What do people picture when they hear the words fake news? Some people think of times like this.
This video right here appearing to show Turkey's military Kurd civilians in a Syrian border town.
This video, obtained by ABC News, appears to show the fury of the Turkish attack on the border town of Tal Abyad 2 nights ago.
That was ABC News, but the wartime footage supposedly out of Syria is fake. It's actually from a place called Knob Creek, Kentucky, where an annual gun show is put on with everything from fireworks to miniguns. But ABC published it to the world on their multi-million viewer platform as if it were conflict footage from Syria. In the grand scheme of things, that's a very simple mistake. Fake footage, fake story, fake news. But what if I told you that the media factory was bigger than you could ever possibly imagine, with global sensationalism, psychological manipulation, and severe consequences? Fake news is a very flexible term. Does it mean outright lies? Does it mean manipulated narratives? Does it mean slanted interpretation of objectively verifiable facts? Or is it something else entirely? Even more confusing, what would we call a synchronized and specifically manufactured narrative emerging simultaneously across dozens of local news channels with identical wording? Is that fake news, or is it just coordination of sorts, like this?
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these things they simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
That was a collection of TV hosts, local TV hosts, being fed a scripted narrative from an organization called the Sinclair Broadcasting Group, first reported on by Deadspin. Is it good to have synchronized messaging on that large of a scale? Is it bad? Or is it just another indication of what I like to call the media factory? How about another example? This right here is footage from Reuters, showcasing the arrest of climate activist Greta Thunberg during a protest in Germany. On the surface, many people likely have some kind of politicized opinions on all this, but the objective facts of the matter seem to be as follows. German authorities appear to have been unaware of who Greta Thunberg is. For those that don't know, she's a globally famous Swedish teenager vowing to protest until international leaders take action on mitigating climate change and a couple of other agenda items. However, after carrying her away from the main protest, physically, they were bombarded with media, cameras, and requests for a photograph. This led to a rather bizarre situation. Police stood there posing with her temporarily, showcasing a calm and collected activist, gently moved to a position where she was then smiling for the cameras, with the police actively arresting her, which was clipped and shipped all across the world, primarily America, as a packaged individual narrative. Many viewers watching this right now likely saw at some point footage from this encounter crossing their feed, but rather than some sort of fake arrest or a staged photo shoot by police, as most people were calling it, it is infinitely more likely, I would say certain in fact, that something quite a bit simpler had transpired. The real explanation here, far from flashy headlines or politicized narratives, was that police had arrested someone, found out that she was famous, and swept up in the moment, surrounded by a throng of clamoring journalists and media outlets asking to get footage with cameras. They allowed the shoot to take place, participating as a result of media persuasion. Cameras change behavior. That's going to be a theme for this entire video. This is a phenomenon studied as far back as 1953, where 31 trained observers were posted at a Chicago Day parade in order to document discrepancies between how events are reported, how television viewers perceive them, and how actual audiences experience them in the moment. From that research, quote, the differing characteristics of the television version may be attributed to A, technological bias, i.e. the necessary arbitrary sequence of telecasting events, and the choices by television personnel of what is important, B, structuring an event by the announcer who, through his commentary, helps the spectator gain a stable orientation from one particular perspective, and C, reciprocal effects which modify the event itself by staging it in a way which makes it more suitable for telecasting and creates among the actors the consciousness of acting for a larger audience. End quote. That's the crazy part. Modify the events by staging them in a way which makes it more suitable for telecasting and creates among the actors the consciousness of acting for a larger audience. Cameras change behavior, and when dealing with polarization or other effects of political division, the media factory is, at best, contributing to an atmosphere of deception, and at worst, manufacturing news by virtue of their very existence, perpetuating a cycle of sensationalized behavior. Today's video sponsor, all about online privacy and data protection. Every day, your data is at risk of being sold to third-party brokers or accessed without your knowledge in data breaches. To be perfectly honest, some people might not care about this, but they should, and for anyone who wants to prevent that kind of thing, today's video sponsor can help. Companies maintain a lot of your personal information in their records, all over the place, and not just the ones you know about or signed up for deliberately, but other data firms as well who then sell it all across the internet. For everyday users, it's nearly impossible to take any action on this because there are hundreds of these data brokers, and it's a lengthy process to contact them, fight objections, and get your data legally removed. However, Incogni does all of this for you quickly and easily. The process is extremely simple. This is something I can personally attest to. Sign up for the site, give them specific legal permission to work on your behalf, and let them know what kind of information you'll be having removed. I've done it, and I stand by the results. Plus, it is a service created by a long-standing channel partner who makes it possible to do what I do, Surfshark. The first 100 people to click the link down below in the description and use code Echelon at checkout will get 60% off their subscription to Incogni. Again, link down below and promo code Echelon for the first 100 viewers only who use it to get 60% off their subscription. Big thank you to Incogni for sponsoring the channel. Let's go a little bit more in depth. Does anyone remember Kimbo Slice? Obviously not, because why would you? But Kimbo Slice is a very interesting and glaring example of a media pseudo event that seems to have been caught right out in the open. Kimbo Slice was a notorious street fighter and bare-knuckle boxer in the early 2000s, culminating in 2010 when a set of losses ended his time in the spotlight. More interesting than his actual career, by far, however, is the controversy surrounding it. In 2008, Kimbo Slice was set to fight against UFC dropout Seth Petrozelli, but when the fight spectacularly ended in just 14 seconds by way of knockout, things got interesting. Seth Petrozelli, on record, stated, quote, "The promoters kind of hinted to me and they gave me the money to stand and trade with him. They didn't want me to take him down. Let's just put it that way. It was worth my while to try to stand up and punch with him." End quote. This would, of course, later be denied by the event organizer, Elite XC, and retracted by Petrozelli himself, but Elite XC parent company Pro Elite immediately went bankrupt following the controversy, raising questions about motive when considering all context. A street-based bare-knuckles online celebrity, whose one-dimensional fighting style made him popular initially, was out of his depth against anyone who was more well-rounded. But not to worry, because in an effort to make the bout much more interesting, Elite XC allegedly attempted to augment the fighting style of Kimbo Slice's opponent to make the bout more interesting for viewers and longer, while their parent company Pro Elite struggled to maintain stable footing. That, in my opinion, would be what's called a failed media pseudo event that also happens to contain underlying elements of sports manipulation and probably criminal activity if it's true. I should note that the Florida State Boxing Commission found no evidence of wrongdoing a few days after the company went out of business, so viewers can draw their own conclusions on that part, but the basic premise remains. Cameras change behavior. They change behavior by way of actions when people realize that they're being filmed. They change behavior in more direct ways when newsworthy events are deliberately altered to be much more cinematic. And they change behavior by creating something that can be entirely divorced from truth, which is then packaged and sold to the people without their knowledge. So why does it matter? A climate activist, a street fighter, and a simple mistake by a news agency. Big deal. Well, it is a big deal because the media factory is not governed, limited, or even hindered by the size and scope of an individual story. They are governed simply by a need to produce engaging content as often as possible for consumption by as many people as possible. This creates an issue. News, with a capital N, is not just informational reporting, it's entertainment. And entertainment gets ratcheted up in relative intensity as the audience becomes desensitized to it. A 14-second bout between Kimbo Slice, a notorious street boxer, and Seth Petrozelli, a UFC dropout, is entertaining, but a multi-round process where the fan-favorite street fighter slugs it out with a UFC dropout with all the blood and fanfare one could expect from a street fight, capitalizing on his existing audience, is better, much better, and a symbolic statue being torn down after a kinetic warfare invasion, well, that's just fantastic. Thoroughly detailed by journalist Peter Mass, and later discussed by a wide range of media outlets in the aftermath of their colossal mistake, the toppling of Saddam Hussein's statue in Baghdad's Firdos Square wasn't exactly what it seemed to be at the time. Setting the stage here, the toppling of Saddam Hussein's statue at Firdos Square was seen as a joyous liberation of the country carried out by a crowd of jubilated Iraqis. Portrayed by Time magazine, quote, "Saddam Hussein has fallen. The tearing down of his ubiquitous statue in Baghdad Wednesday symbolized the collapse of his regime as U.S. troops took control of the capital streets to a jubilant welcome. Iraqis cheered and waved, denouncing Saddam and, in many cases, praising President George Bush. When a group of Iraqis took a sledgehammer to the giant plinth beneath a Saddam statue opposite the International Press Headquarters at the Palestine Hotel, journalists and TV anchors everywhere couldn't resist making the comparison with the tearing down of the Berlin Wall in 1989. While the statue's toppling may become the signature video clip signifying the event, images from elsewhere in the city served as a reminder that this was nothing like Berlin in 1989. End quote. Compelling stuff, but remember, cameras change behavior. In the immediate aftermath of the invasion, the video of Saddam's statue falling was a sort of culminating event that visually seemed to encapsulate the entire war. It was a celebration. It was said that Iraqis were the ones rejoicing, and that the statue coming down was a sign of victory and change, but reality is a very different creature compared to what the media factory captures. In truth, according to eyewitness reports, testimony, and broader photo-evidentiary context, the crowd of people celebrating was majorly composed of just journalists. The jubilant crowd of watchers were mostly holding cameras, and what was packaged, then exported to the world, was a far cry from the actual series of events taking place on the ground. Everyone was expecting a sort of culminating event of sorts. Even as the city burned, looters ran rampant, and a small military-secured bubble was formed in the middle of all the chaos. Hordes of cameras were spun up, a mass of journalists formed, pointing those cameras in a shared direction all around them, and once the demand for a culminating event was created, the event itself materialized and quickly followed. For ABC News, they were either given or gathered a falsified video which was then improperly labeled and pushed out to the world as if it were a Syrian conflict zone. For Greta Thunberg, the demand from a group of reporters, the incessant demand I would likely say, from reporters and cameras, created a photo shoot instead of just being an arrest sequence, as it should have been, that was then spread to every corner of the internet as a damning indictment of media ethics and reporting, but again, it was manufactured. For Kimbo Slice, an entertainment company created a media event with an enormous amount of cameras pointed at a single arena, which then led to allegations directly from one of the fighters that they had attempted to modify fighting styles as well to create more drama as the parent company basically fell apart. And for the entire world, a scene out of Iraq, or not the entire world, but most of the world, a scene out of Iraq became a symbolic victory for America despite the fact that it was almost entirely fabricated as a direct result of the dynamic between cameras and crowds. Possibly motivated by a clamoring horde of fixated media reporters, the Iraqi man who took the sledgehammer to the base of Saddam's statue now profoundly regrets the decision, feeling pain and shame when he passes the location. Is that a result of impulsive behavior, United States failure in the aftermath of the war, improper foreign policy? Who knows? Or is it a result of media creating stories through their very existence as a spectacle amplifier of sorts, which pulled this man into a trance of expectations where he kind of dutifully played his part and did what was expected of him? My guess, a combination of factors endemic to the process of gathering breaking news resulted in an atmosphere not unlike that of mob mentality, but twisted and perverse beyond it, since the mob is holding cameras and expecting someone else to do something for them to make things interesting. The media factory is precisely that, a factory, a production line, a system in place that seems to now create a constant flow of excitement and drama instead of merely documenting it if and when it occurs. And I can't pretend that all of it is intentional or malicious or even negligent. Some of it is just unfortunate. But the media factory, above all else, is a self-governing perpetual engine that demands the most extreme entertainment it can find at all hours of the day, every single day of the week. If it bleeds, it leads, is a commonly understood phrase in many parts of the world. Maybe not that many parts of the world, but still. And the reason for that is because news syndicates and their audiences prioritize violent and negative coverage. I'm guilty of falling into that feedback loop myself. I mean, just look at the type of content I produce. But research out of McGill University in Canada, titled Consumer Demand for Cynical and Negative News Frames, studying tone, topic, policy, and strategy, found that, quote, regardless of their preferences as stated in a survey, participants are more likely to select negative content. More informed participants are drawn to strategic frames as well, end quote. What does it mean? Simple. It means that we, as viewers and receivers of prepackaged news media, are naturally drawn to negative content. Having identified this, the media factory now caters to it by influencing the world we live in, even so far as to create wildly inaccurate global headlines simply by existing and trying to film something. News media is a dangerous thing. For-profit reporting that competes against other channels to capture audience interest seems purpose-built for a descent into industrialized but scripted chaos. And it may be a completely unavoidable phenomenon, but at the very least, we all need to understand it. That's it. If you want to support, please consider checking the links down below, primarily locals and Patreon for a monthly subscription, also merchandise, social media, the video sponsor, some YouTube alternatives, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. And I'll try to look for more cool topics that aren't negative all the time. Like, I gotta spice it up and have some cool, fun things. But yeah, and as always, thank you all for watching and have a nice night.